Have you ever had that feeling, that quiet whisper inside, that kind of intuition telling you there's just more to you than what people see, like a deeper current, maybe unseen, pulling beneath your everyday thoughts and feelings? It's this sense, almost undeniable sometimes, of a huge inner world way beyond what we're usually aware of. And that feeling, it really spurred one of the most radical explorations of the human mind ever. We're talking about Carl Jung, the brilliant, sometimes controversial Swiss psychiatrist, early 20th century. He just dared to try and map this incredible inner territory. And he famously broke away from his mentor, Sigmund Freud. Not just looking for, repressed childhood stuff, but really setting off on a quest for meaning, for spirituality, for human wholeness. So our mission today in this deep dive is basically a practical trip into Jung's core ideas. It's not just academic theory. Think of it more like a guide designed to shine a light on those unseen forces that honestly really do shape your life in profound ways. The promise here is a journey, maybe even a transformative one. Uncovering how engaging with this hidden psychological landscape can lead you to a more authentic, more integrated, and ultimately a much more satisfying way of being. So let's explore these depths.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating about Jung's whole vision, I think, is that his ambition wasn't just about fixing symptoms, like putting a bandage on things. He wanted to understand the entirety of the human mind, the whole system, which he called the psyche. And he had this core belief, making the unconscious conscious. That's the path. That's how you become who you truly are meant to be. And that fundamentally boosts your life satisfaction, your sense of meaning. So what we're doing today isn't just talking theory. We're really setting the stage, laying out a framework, a deeply rewarding system for self-discovery. It's like getting a map, a powerful map for understanding your own inner world. And honestly, this map can completely change how you see yourself, how you see your life. It can unlock something richer, more intentional.
You mentioned the break from Freud, and Jung's journey really was revolutionary, wasn't it? A definite departure from the path Freud was paving. Freud was so focused, almost laser-like, on repressed sexuality, childhood issues, seeing those as the root of almost everything.
Almost exclusively.
But Jung just cast a much wider net. He was looking for something bigger. He embraced the spiritual side, the myths, the human search for meaning that goes way beyond just, biological drives.
Exactly. It was a huge shift, moving from digging only into the dark corners of your personal past to trying to grasp the whole vast, rich tapestry of human experience, both personal and collective.
Right. And analytical psychology, which is what Jung called his system, it is complex, no doubt about it. But the payoff is immense. Think of your psyche, your mind, like a vast ocean. Your daily life, your immediate thoughts, feelings, that's just the surface, right? The ways you can see. But underneath, there are these progressively deeper levels, vast realms, each with its own stuff, its own contents, and a really powerful influence on that surface. Our conscious self, the you that you recognize right now, it's just a tiny fraction of this whole incredible system.
Just the tip of the iceberg, really.
Precisely. The vast majority of our psychological reality, our true depth, it's lurking way down below our awareness, mostly unseen. And Jung gave us a structure for this ocean, didn't he? 3 main layers, all interconnected. At the surface, you've got the ego that's your conscious mind. Then just below that, the personal unconscious, which is unique to each of us. And then way down deep, the foundational level, the collective unconscious. Yeah. It's almost mind-boggling to think that most of what makes you you is actually in those deeper unconscious parts.
It really is. So let's start at the top with that island of consciousness. The ego. This is the I in your mind, the center of your conscious awareness. It's everything you're aware of right now, your thoughts, your memories, your feelings, what you're seeing and hearing. The ego is kind of like your executive function, It navigates the outside world, makes decisions, keeps that sense of identity going day to day.
It's what tells you you're you when you wake up each morning.
Exactly that.
Okay, so it's central. It's the executive.
Yeah.
But what's the catch? You implied it wasn't the whole picture.
Ah, yes, that's the critical piece, isn't it? The ego, as functional as it is, has some pretty significant limitations. Its biggest illusion, really, is that it thinks it is the whole personality. It believes it's the master of the entire psychic house. Jung had this brilliant analogy. The ego is like the concierge in a grand hotel lobby, very busy, managing arrivals, departures, taking messages.
Looks important.
Looks very important, but completely unaware of the vast, intricate mansion, all the floors, all the rooms, all the hidden passages behind that front desk. So the real nugget here is your conscious I, your ego, it's a capable manager, but it's not the true owner of your inner world. And if you mistake it for the whole deal, you seriously limit your life potential. And Jung pointed out something crucial that happened later in life. Usually in the second half, the ego's dominance starts to naturally decrease. A deeper, more encompassing center, which he called the self, begins to emerge and take precedence. This isn't about decline, it's a fundamental rebalancing, a major goal of the whole Jungian journey.
Okay, so from the ego's sunny island, we go down a level into the slightly murkier waters of the personal unconscious. This bit is totally unique to each person, right? Holding all of this experiences, memories, thoughts that just aren't conscious right now.
That's right. And it's not just stuff you've simply forgotten, like, where you put your keys yesterday. It also holds actively repressed material, things that were maybe too threatening, too painful, too socially unacceptable for your ego to handle consciously at the time.
Like stuffing things in the attic or the basement you don't want to deal with?
Exactly like that. Out of sight, but definitely not gone. And within this personal unconscious, we find something really vital: complexes. Think of them as these emotionally charged clusters. Thoughts, feelings, memories, perceptions, all swirling around a central theme. Like, someone might have a mother complex. That would bundle up all their personal experiences, good and bad, conscious and unconscious, related to the idea of mother.
We hear phrases like inferiority complex or power complex all the time.
Exactly. Those are common examples. And what's really wild is how these complexes can almost behave like autonomous little subpersonalities inside you. They can exert this incredibly powerful pull on your behavior, your emotions, your relationships, often completely without your conscious awareness or permission.
So is that what's happening when someone, pushes your buttons and you react way out of proportion? Is that a complex getting triggered?
That's precisely it, most of the time. A complex gets activated maybe by a word, a situation, a person, and it just takes over the controls, bypassing your rational ego completely. The key insight is this: these unconscious complexes are like hidden landmines or triggers, and they can hijack your responses and basically shape your reality much more than your conscious mind realizes.
Okay, now we go even deeper into Jung's most revolutionary concept, and maybe the most challenging one to grasp: the collective unconscious. This is the abyssal deep, you said, a shared, inherited layer of psychic stuff common to all humans, regardless of culture or personal history.
That's the idea. It's not about your specific repressed memories or experiences. This is a universal ancient layer. Jung proposed it's passed down through generations, almost like psychological DNA. It's not learned, it's innate. And how he got there is just fascinating. Jung noticed these incredible similarities: symbols, myths, religious ideas, even fairy tale motifs popping up in vastly different cultures that had no known contact with each other.
Like what sort of things?
Well, think about the prevalence of great flood myths across the globe.
Okay.
Or the near universal story of the hero's journey facing trials, slaying dragons, returning with a boon. Or the figure of the wise old man or woman appearing as a guide. Jung asked, why? Why do these same patterns appear everywhere? His answer was profound. They aren't just being invented over and over again independently. They're emerging from a common underlying psychic structure that all humans share. Yeah. And this shared foundation explains why certain stories, symbols, and figures resonate so damn deeply with us. They tap into something ancient, something universal within our being that just recognizes these patterns. And living within this collective unconscious are the core structures he called archetypes. These are the inherited blueprints for our most universal human experiences.
So if we put all these layers together, ego, personal unconscious, collective unconscious, we start seeing the psyche as this dynamic ecosystem, right? Everything's connected. A conscious problem, maybe like that chronic fear of failure you mentioned, isn't just floating there on its own. It might be driven by a success complex in your personal unconscious, maybe rooted in childhood stuff like parental expectations.
Exactly. And we can take it even deeper. That success complex itself, while personal, is often structured around a universal archetype from the collective unconscious. Maybe the archetype of the hero, whose whole identity is tied up in proving their worth through struggle and achievement.
So there's a chain reaction from the deepest universal layer right up to your conscious personal struggles.
Precisely. It shows this causal chain flowing from the universal depths right up to your most personal conscious experiences. And this really illustrates why just dealing with things on the surface often doesn't work long term. Trying to fix that fear of failure just with conscious willpower, it's like pulling the top off a weed but leaving the massive root system completely untouched underground.
Right. You have to get to the root.
You have to get to the root. The core insight is Real, lasting change means understanding and addressing the deep, unseen roots of your conscious problems, not just fiddling with the leaves.
And this idea completely blows up the common assumption that we're born as blank slates, right? Little tabula rasa idea.
It absolutely challenges it. Jung suggests we are definitely not born psychologically empty. Instead, we arrive preloaded, you could say, with a rich, inherited psychological blueprint. It contains the accumulated wisdom, the patterns, the experiences of countless ancestors. This psychological DNA helps explain so many things: innate tendencies, gut feelings, instinctual behaviors, even those seemingly irrational universal phobias like a deep fear of snakes or the dark.
Things you might fear even if you've never had a bad experience with them personally.
Exactly. They might not stem from your personal life story, but from the activation of an ancient inherited memory trace that flagged snakes or darkness as dangerous for survival ages ago. This really reframes that whole nature versus nurture debate. Jung proposes there's a deep, inherent psychological nature that powerfully shapes how we perceive and respond to the nurture we get throughout life.
Okay, so diving into that collective unconscious, you said it's not just chaos down there, it has structure. And that structure is made of these archetypes, these universal patterns, the blueprints of human experience.
That's right. But it's really important to clarify what they are and aren't. Archetypes aren't inherited memories like remembering your grandmother's face. Think of them more as innate predispositions or potentialities, empty psychic templates almost, like pre-installed software frameworks that get filled in and activated by your actual life experiences.
Okay, so they're potential patterns.
Exactly. Potential patterns of perceiving, feeling, and behaving in characteristically human ways. And once they're activated by life, they show up everywhere. In global myths, religions, fairy tales, art, and very personally, in your dreams and fantasies. You see them in those recurring figures that have captivated humanity forever. The hero setting out on a quest, the great mother who can be both nurturing and terrifyingly devouring, the wise old sage, the mischievous trickster, the innocent child.
Figures we see in stories again and again.
Constantly. While there are countless archetypes, Jung really focused on 4 primary ones that he saw as the pillars of our personality structure. These are the persona, the shadow, the animus, and the self.
All right, let's unpack those. Starting with the persona.
Yeah.
You called it the mask we wear.
Yeah, it's your social face.
Yeah.
The self you present to the outside world. The term comes straight from Latin, the masks ancient Greek and Roman actors wore in the theater. And it perfectly describes that collection of roles, attitudes, behaviors we adopt to fit in, to meet society's expectations, to function in different contexts.
Like your work self versus your family self or your friend self.
Exactly. You have different personas for different situations, and it's necessary. It's an adaptive tool. It acts as a kind of protective shield for the more vulnerable, private parts of your psyche. It's absolutely essential for navigating social life. But, and this is but there's a real danger involved: persona inflation.
Inflation, like it gets too big.
Precisely. It's when you over-identify with the mask. You start to lose touch with your authentic feelings, your genuine self underneath. You actually begin to believe you are the role you're playing. You know, the super successful doctor who only sees himself as a doctor, or the tough boss who can't switch off the boss persona, even at home.
Leads to a pretty hollow existence, I imagine.
Totally hollow. It's like living life as a performance instead of genuinely being. So the goal isn't to get rid of the persona you can't and you wouldn't want to. The goal is to recognize it for what it is: a functional, necessary mask. And crucially, never mistake that mask for the real face underneath. The core truth is, your social masks are vital tools, but confusing them with your true self makes life feel empty and fake.
Okay, now, the shadow. You said this is where it gets really interesting and maybe challenging.
Oh, absolutely. Confronting the shadow is arguably the most vital and often the most difficult step on this whole journey of self-discovery. The shadow is essentially your dark side. It's the psychological container for everything your conscious ego and your carefully crafted persona deem unacceptable. All those ideas, feelings, weaknesses, desires, instincts that you are utterly convinced you are not.
How does it even form?
It's a direct consequence of creating the persona. It's like,
Right.
for every quality you consciously choose to display and identify with, you automatically push its opposite into the unconscious shadow. So if your persona is all about being kind, patient, and agreeable, your shadow is likely packed with repressed aggression, impatience, maybe even cruelty or selfishness. And because it's unconscious, you don't usually see your own shadow directly. You see it through projection.
Projection. Blaming others for our own stuff.
Basically, yes. It's a defense mechanism. We deny our own unacceptable impulses, feelings, or traits by attributing them to other people. Those qualities you find intensely irritating, infuriating, maybe even morally disgusting in other people, they are very, very often unrecognized aspects of your own shadow.
That's uncomfortable.
Deeply uncomfortable. But pay attention. When you have a really strong, disproportionate, negative emotional reaction to someone, anger, contempt, disgust, that feels too much for the situation, that's a massive red flag. It's a sign your own shadow has just been triggered and projected. It's almost funny how reliably it works, isn't it? Now, here's a crucial nuance. The shadow isn't inherently evil, it's simply the unknown, the unacknowledged, the disowned part of you. And critically, it's a source of immense psychic energy, huge potential, both for creativity and destruction, depending on how it's handled. And it doesn't just hold the negative stuff we typically think of, it also holds incredibly valuable, positive qualities that we might have repressed simply because they weren't valued or allowed in our upbringing or culture.
Like what kind of positive things?
Things like healthy aggression, the ability to stand up for yourself, assertiveness, raw creativity, spontaneity, instinctual wisdom, gut feelings, vitality. If you deny your shadow entirely, you're essentially cutting yourself off from this massive source of energy, power, and authenticity.
No, shadow work isn't about killing it off.
Not at all. The goal is to bring its contents bit by bit into the light of consciousness, to acknowledge them, yes, this too is part of me, and then to integrate their energy constructively into your life. The key takeaway here is huge. Your shadow isn't just your darkness. It's a goldmine of untapped power, creativity, and vitality waiting to be claimed.
That makes sense. And you mentioned earlier this link between the persona and the shadow, like a seesaw.
Exactly. It's a dynamic axis, and understanding it is key to understanding both psychological problems and the path to authenticity. There's a direct inverse relationship. The more rigidly perfect, the more one-sided you make your persona, the more psychic energy gets shoved down into the unconscious, creating a bigger, darker, more powerful shadow.
Which builds up pressure.
Immense internal tension. Someone who becomes what Jung called a walking persona, totally identified with their mask, is psychologically brittle. They lack depth, flexibility, authenticity, and eventually that repressed shadow will find a way out. It might erupt through destructive projections, constantly finding fault and blaming others, or through self-sabotaging behaviors that wreck their own success or relationships, or it can manifest as neurotic symptoms, anxiety, depression, psychosomatic issues. So the path toward a genuinely authentic and satisfying life, it must involve the courageous work of dialing back the persona's dominance and consciously integrating the raw energy and even the wisdom hidden within the shadow.
Okay, moving on to the next major players. The anima and animus. Jung called these the contrasexual archetypes, right?
That's right. The anima is the inner feminine principle or image within a man's psyche, and the animus is the inner masculine principle or image within a woman's psyche. And it's really important to emphasize this isn't just about conforming to or defying stereotypical gender roles. These represent much deeper psychological principles inherent in everyone. Jung linked the feminine principle, the anima, with what he called eros. This is the capacity for relationship, relatedness, empathy, intuition, emotional connection, valuing the personal. Conversely, he linked the masculine principle, the animus, with logos. This is logic, reason, assertiveness, objective thinking, structure, discrimination.
Where do these inner images come from?
They're formed from a blend of universal collective ideas and images about the opposite gender that we inherit through the collective unconscious, combined with our own very personal experiences, especially with significant figures like our parents, siblings, early crushes, romantic partners. Now, in many societies, historically and even now, there's pressure for men to suppress their feminine eros qualities and for women to suppress their masculine logos qualities. Jung saw this as a major hindrance to psychological development.
Because you're cutting off half of yourself.
Exactly. Integrating your anima or animus is absolutely crucial for achieving psychological balance and wholeness. It means gaining access to and being able to consciously express the full spectrum of human potential. It allows you to be both rational and deeply relational, both assertive and empathetic. These archetypes also play another vital role. They act as mediators, as bridges between your conscious ego and the deep collective unconscious. They often pop up in dreams as guides, mysterious figures, maybe lovers or opponents, leading you towards greater self-knowledge, often towards a deeper sense of meaning in life. But here's the paradox, and it's a powerful one. The anima and animus are keys to profound personal meaning, and simultaneously they are a primary source of really intense relationship conflict. Jung even called the anima the archetype of meaning for a man. If a man loses connection with his inner feminine, his anima, he can experience this devastating loss of meaning, a sense of emptiness, even leading to suicidal thoughts in extreme cases.
Wow. And you said they're also a source of relationship problems. How does that work? That seems critical.
It absolutely is. An unintegrated anima, or animus, is, Jung believed, perhaps the fundamental source of trouble in romantic relationships. Because we unconsciously project our own inner soul image, this idealized or perhaps feared image of the masculine or feminine, onto our actual partners.
So we're not seeing the real person.
Often, no. We're seeing our projection. This leads to irrational fantasies about who they are, wildly unrealistic expectations. She should be my perfect soulmate who understands everything without me speaking. Insidious prejudices. All men are only after one thing. And then, inevitably, bitter disappointment and conflict when our partner fails to live up to this impossible unconscious image we've plastered onto them.
That explains a lot.
Doesn't it? So this presents a really crucial dual task for personal growth. Integrating your anima or animus is essential for finding your own deep personal sense of purpose and meaning, and it's essential for developing mature, healthy, objective relationships where you can actually see and connect with the other person as they are. The core insight is profound. Integrating your inner other isn't just for self-balance. It's the absolute bedrock for real, authentic connection with actual others.
Okay, so we've had the persona, the shadow, the anima and animus.
Yeah.
That brings us to the last of the big four, the self. You describe this as the ultimate, the most central archetype.
Yes. The self represents wholeness, order, the unified totality of the entire psyche, encompassing both the conscious and the unconscious realms. Its realization, its emergence into conscious experience, is the ultimate goal of that lifelong journey we call individuation. And it's absolutely vital here to get the distinction between the ego and the self really clear.
Right, because they sound similar but aren't.
Not at all. The ego, remember, is just the center of your conscious awareness. The self is the organizing principle, the true center of your total personality, conscious and unconscious combined. Use that circle analogy again. If the self is the entire large circle, the ego is just a small dot, maybe somewhere near the center, but just a dot nonetheless. In the first half of life, Jung said, our main job is developing that dot, the ego, establishing ourselves in the world, building skills, finding our place. But the great, grand journey of the second half of life, that involves the ego coming to the humbling realization that it is not the whole circle. It's not the boss. It needs to learn to shift its allegiance, moving from being the self-proclaimed master of the psyche to becoming a conscious servant and facilitator for the expression of the wiser, greater self.
That sounds like a huge shift in perspective. Humbling, as you said.
Profoundly humbling and utterly transformative. It's a recentering of the entire personality. The self often shows up symbolically in dreams, in art, in religious traditions through images of wholeness and unity, things like mandalas, perfect circles, squares, sometimes divine figures, kings, queens. This realization, this felt sense of connection to a cohesive underlying self. This is Jung's equivalent of what other psychologists might call self-actualization. It's that profound feeling of finally coming home to your deepest, most authentic essence. The ultimate point here is, the self is the blueprint for your innate wholeness, the guiding center pulling you towards becoming the most complete version of yourself.
Okay, so tying all this together, at the very core of Jung's entire psychological system is this concept, individuation. You mentioned it a few times. It's not just a concept, it's the goal, right? The life journey itself.
Yeah, exactly. It's the natural, lifelong process, or perhaps the potential process of becoming a psychological individual, which means becoming a separate, indivisible unity, becoming whole. It's the journey of self-realization, the quest to discover and then live out your own unique meaning and purpose in life. But let's be really clear what it isn't. Individuation is absolutely not about achieving some state of flawless perfection. That's a misunderstanding. It's about achieving wholeness. And that involves the courageous, often really difficult work of acknowledging, accepting, and then actively integrating all the different, often conflicting parts of yourself. The conscious parts and the unconscious parts, the light side and the dark side, the persona you show the world and the hidden shadow, the masculine and the feminine principles within you. It's the process of shedding the false coverings of the persona and freeing yourself from the unconscious, overwhelming power of those archetypal images we just discussed.
So what does this actually mean for someone listening to your life?
It means embarking on the most significant adventure there is, the adventure into your own depths. The core truth of individuation is this. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about the courageous, messy work of integrating all your parts to become genuinely whole and uniquely yourself.
And one of Jung's most practical, most helpful contributions, I think, is his model of psychological development across the lifespan. He famously divided life into two distinct halves. This framework gives us such a useful way to understand how our priorities change, the different challenges we face, and maybe the real purpose of aging.
Absolutely. In the first half of life, which Jung typically placed roughly up until age 35 or 40, the main psychological task is predominantly external. This phase is all about ego development, adapting to the outer world, establishing your place in society. So, building a career, maybe starting a family, acquiring skills, developing that functional persona we talked about. Your energy is mostly directed outwards towards building a life in the world. But then, usually around midlife, something really crucial is supposed to happen. A necessary shift in psychological orientation begins, or should begin. The focus starts turning inward. The external tasks of the first half career, family, status, they've largely been achieved, or at least addressed. And now, totally different kinds of questions start bubbling up, demanding attention. Like, what's the real meaning of my life, beyond these roles and achievements? Who am I really, apart from being a parent, a spouse, a professional? How do I make peace with my own mortality, the fact that life is finite? The primary work of this second half of life is about consciously building a relationship with the unconscious. It's about the ego learning to serve the emerging wiser self rather than clinging desperately to its old dominance. It's about finding a deeper, more personal, internal source of meaning.
So that classic midlife crisis,
Yeah.
the sports car, the affairs, the sudden career change, Jung saw that not as a breakdown, but potentially as a call to this deeper work.
That's exactly how Jung reframed it. And it's such a powerful, non-pathologizing way to look at it. From a Jungian perspective, that common carrot of turmoil, confusion, restlessness, deep dissatisfaction, it is absolutely not a sign of failure or psychological collapse, quite the opposite. It's a natural and profoundly necessary summons from the psyche itself. It's a call to finally begin the crucial inner work of the second half of life. The suffering, the angst, the feeling that something is missing or wrong, that's not the problem. That's the stimulus for the next deeper stage of psychological growth.
It's a wake-up call.
A wake-up call. The crisis is essentially the soul yelling, hey, time to shift focus. Stop looking only outward for validation and achievement, and start looking inward for meaning and connection to your deeper self. This perspective completely reframes what's often seen as a terrible time into a profound opportunity. An opportunity for deep growth, for renewal, for finding a much more solid and enduring sense of life satisfaction. The simple wisdom here is just life-changing. Your midlife crisis isn't a failure. It's a crucial, soul-deep invitation to find authentic meaning and purpose.
Now, it's important to stress, you said individuation isn't like climbing a smooth ladder. It's messy.
Oh, absolutely not smooth. It's dynamic, it's often full of conflict, it's driven forward by the inherent tension and hopefully the eventual synthesis of psychological opposites within us. The psyche, like nature itself, is a self-regulating system. It constantly seeks balance. So whenever one aspect of our personality becomes too dominant, too extreme, too one-sided, the unconscious automatically compensates by activating its opposite pole.
Trying to level things out.
And the key to real psychological growth, Jung believed, lies in our ability to consciously hold the tension between these opposing forces. Not repress one, not choose one over the other immediately, but tolerate the discomfort of the paradox. This interplay and synthesis of opposites is the very engine driving individuation. It involves the courageous work of reconciling these core pairs, conscious versus unconscious, thinking versus feeling, sensing versus intuition, persona versus shadow, anima versus animus, and ultimately the ego learning to relate properly to the self. The goal isn't for one side to win to conquer the other. It's for these opposites to enter into a dynamic, respectful dialogue. And out of holding that creative tension, something new can emerge, a more integrated perspective, a more nuanced understanding. Jung called this the transcendent function, leading to a third thing, a synthesis that wasn't there before. This is what leads to a more balanced, complex, and whole personality.
Okay, that makes sense for the inner journey. But Jung also made this statement that sounds paradoxical, that individuation, becoming more unique and separate, actually leads to more intense and broader collective relationships. How does becoming more individual lead to better connection with others?
Ah, the great paradox. It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? But the resolution reveals a really deep, sometimes uncomfortable truth about human connection. Jung's point was, Truly authentic relationship is simply impossible without a significant degree of individuation. Why? Because an unindividuated person, someone whose unconscious aspects like the shadow and animus are largely unintegrated, relates to others primarily through a thick fog of projections.
We keep coming back to projection.
It's central. They unconsciously project their own unowned dark side, their shadow, onto people they dislike or fear, making demons out of them. And they project their idealized inner feminine or masculine image, their anima or animus, onto their romantic partners, turning them into gods or goddesses who are bound to disappoint. In doing this, they aren't actually seeing the other person for who they really are. They're interacting with a distorted reflection of their own inner world.
Relating to ghosts, almost?
Relating to ghosts of their own psyche, exactly. So the difficult, absolutely essential work of individuation involves the process of consciously withdrawing these projections. How? By owning your shadow, yes, that darkness is in me too, and integrating your animus. I need to find that inner masculine feminine strength or relatedness within myself, not demand it from my partner. Only when you've done a significant amount of that inner work can you begin to see and relate to another person objectively, authentically, as the separate, whole, complex individual they actually are. So the core insight is profound and may be challenging. True, deep connection with others demands first becoming truly and uniquely yourself by taking back the projections that were blinding you to their reality. The solitary inward journey is the prerequisite for genuine outward connection.
Okay, so we've got the map, the ego, the unconscious layers, the archetypes, the journey of individuation. Now, how do we actually navigate this inner territory? We need some tools, right? Jungian psychology isn't just a description, it's profoundly practical. It gives us ways to foster that conscious, ongoing relationship with the unconscious.
Absolutely. And these methods, these tools, they aren't quick fixes. You don't just learn them and you're done. They are much more like lifelong practices, ways to engage in that essential dialogue between your conscious mind and the vast depths of your own conscious. The dialogue that is the heart of individuation. They take patience, definitely courage, consistent effort, but the rewards in terms of self-understanding and living a more authentic life are just immense.
And let's get practical then. Let's dive into some of these methods. We have to start with shadow work, right? We've established how crucial confronting and integrating the shadow is, bringing those disowned, repressed parts into the light.
Indeed. And since the shadow is mostly unconscious, we usually can't just decide to look at it directly. We glimpse it indirectly, the most reliable way. Pay excruciatingly close attention to your projections onto other people. Who pushes your buttons? Who triggers intense irritation, anger, judgment, maybe even disgust in you? Or sometimes, who do you have an obsessive, disproportionate admiration or envy for? The specific qualities in them that provoke such a strong reaction in you are very often direct pointers to unrecognized aspects of your own shadow.
Okay, so how do we work with that? Is there an exercise?
Yes, here's a really practical exercise you can do, maybe with a journal. First, think of a person who consistently irritates or angers you. Really picture them. Then list the specific traits in them that you find so objectionable that really get under your skin. Be brutally honest, just for yourself. Okay, got the list. Now comes the hard part. Engage in some radical self-honesty. Ask yourself, in what situations, perhaps in what subtle ways, or maybe even just in my secret thoughts or fantasies, might I exhibit a version of those exact same traits?
Oof, that requires real honesty.
It requires radical honesty and humility. You might be very surprised and maybe uncomfortable with what you uncover, but that's where the gold is hidden. Another key tool for shadow work is regular, dedicated journaling and self-inquiry. Create a safe, private, completely non-judgmental space, maybe just a notebook where you can explore your inner world without censorship. Use prompts to gently poke into those hidden corners. Ask yourself things like, what am I deeply ashamed of? And where or when did that feeling of shame really start? Or what do I secretly wish I could say or do but feel completely convinced that I absolutely cannot? And definitely, what fears, what insecurities, what past regrets do I typically push away or avoid thinking about? Answering these honestly over time can unlock incredibly powerful insights into your shadow material. Now, a lot of our shadow aspects get formed way back in childhood, times when certain emotions, impulses, or parts of ourselves were shamed, punished, or simply not mirrored, not seen as acceptable or safe. So a significant part of healing the shadow often involves reconnecting with and consciously reparenting your inner child.
Why does one do that?
You can use visualization. Consciously imagine meeting your younger self, maybe at an age when things were particularly difficult. See that child. Ask yourself, what does this child need to hear from me, the adult, right now? What love, acceptance, understanding, or reassurance did they desperately need back then but didn't get? and then offer it to them now internally. You could even try writing a heartfelt letter to your younger self. Explicitly acknowledge their pain, validate their feelings, tell them they weren't wrong to feel that way. It can be incredibly healing. And lastly, remember, the shadow often speaks the language of images, symbols, raw emotions, not necessarily logical words. So engaging in creative acts can be a powerfully transformative way to give expression to shadow energy, to bring it out safely. Don't worry about creating a masterpiece. Just allow yourself to express what's inside. Use painting, drawing, clay, music, movement, dance, whatever feels right. Give tangible form to the feelings, the images, the raw energy associated with your shadow without your conscious mind judging or censoring it. This direct, unfiltered expression can be incredibly cathartic, revealing, and integrating.
Okay, that's shadow work. Now, moving from the darkness into, well, maybe more darkness sometimes. Let's talk about decoding the night. Dream analysis. Jung had a very different view of dreams than Freud, didn't he? He didn't see them as just random brain noise or disguised wishes.
Not at all. Jung saw dreams as natural, purposeful, and profoundly intelligent communications coming directly from the unconscious. He believed they serve a vital compensatory function. They bring to our conscious attention the perspectives, the feelings, the truth that our one-sided conscious ego has been ignoring or overlooking. They're trying to restore psychological balance. They are messages from the self, really. And engaging with them requires a specific approach. Here's a kind of practical, step-by-step guide to Jungian dream analysis to help you start listening to this deep inner messenger. Step 1. Preparation and recall. Honestly, the first hurdle is just remembering your dreams. So, before sleep, put a journal and pen right by your bed, easy reach. Then, consciously set an intention to remember. A simple affirmation like, "Tonight, I will remember my dreams," spoken with conviction, can actually make a difference. Step 2. Record immediately. This is crucial. The moment you wake up, before you move, before you check your phone, before your logical mind fully kicks in, grab that journal and write down everything you can recall. Don't filter, don't interpret yet, just dump it all out. The setting, who is there, what happened, any weird or striking images, and most importantly, how did the dream feel? Note the emotions. Even tiny fragments are valuable. Step 3. Amplify the symbols. Okay, now you have the raw material. Choose a key image or symbol from the dream that feels charged or significant. Maybe it was a wolf, a mysterious key, a crumbling house, a dark forest. First, explore your personal associations. What does wolf mean to you? Based on your life, your experiences, your feelings about wolves, then broaden out. Do a little research or just reflect. What are the common cultural or mythological associations with wolves? What do they represent in folklore, in different myths, in art? This process of amplification enriches the symbol. It connects your very personal dream experience to those universal archetypal patterns in the collective unconscious. Step 4. Connect to waking life. Now, bridge the gap. Reflect on the dream's possible message in the context of your current life situation. What's going on for you right now? Ask yourself some sharp questions. What feeling in this dream feels familiar in my waking life lately? Where have I felt this anxiety or joy or confusion before? What attitude or perspective does the dream present that's really different from my usual conscious one? If this dream is trying to compensate for some imbalance or one-sidedness in my conscious life, what might that imbalance be? And finally, step 5. Look for patterns. A single dream can offer amazing insight, but a series of dreams over time, that's like an ongoing conversation with your unconscious. So if you can, record your dreams consistently for a while, weeks, months, then look back. Are there recurring themes, recurring symbols or figures, repeating emotional patterns? These repetitions are strong clues. They point towards the central issues, the core complexes or archetypal dynamics that your unconscious is persistently working on and trying to bring to your attention. It's like learning to read the narrative of your own soul. The bottom line is powerful. Your dreams are intelligent, purposeful messages from your unconscious, offering invaluable guidance and insight if you just learn their language.
Wow, okay. That's a whole practice in itself. Now, there's another method, one that sounds quite unique to Jung. Active imagination. You said it's not just passive daydreaming. It's more like a conscious dialogue with inner figures while you're awake.
Exactly. It's a powerful, uniquely Jungian technique for engaging directly with figures or energies from the unconscious, but in a waking conscious state. The goal is profound: to build an active bridge between your conscious ego and the unconscious, to allow for the conscious integration of powerful archetypal energies, and potentially to resolve deep-seated inner conflicts by actually interacting with the parts of you involved. It does require active participation, hence the name. Here's a rough step-by-step guide to how you might practice active imagination. First, find a starting point and set the stage. You need some psychic material that has energy, that feels alive for you. This could be a striking image from a recent dream that won't leave you alone, or a persistent, powerful emotion or mood, maybe a recurring fantasy or daydream, or even just a genuine, burning question you want to pose to your inner world. Once you have that starting point, find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed. Turn off your phone. Give yourself some dedicated time. Second, relax and invite the image. Get comfortable. Enter a relaxed, maybe slightly meditative state. Let go of the usual chatter of your mind. Gently focus on your chosen starting point, the dream image, the feeling, the question, and then simply allow an image, a figure, perhaps an entire inner landscape, to arise spontaneously from your unconscious. The key is allowing, not forcing or inventing. Wait patiently and see what emerges from the depths. Third, engage in dialogue. This is the core active part. Once a figure or image appears, consciously decide to engage with it, but let it also have its own autonomy. Let it move, speak, act of its own accord. Your ego then enters the scene. Speak to the figure. You can do this silently in your mind, or some people find it more powerful to speak aloud softly. Ask it questions. Who are you? What do you want from me? What message do you have for me? What do you represent in my life? Then listen patiently, receptively for its response. The response might come as words, but it could also be feelings, further images, bodily sensations. It's crucial to participate with your own genuine reactions and feelings as if this were a real encounter. Treat the figure with respect, even if it's frightening or difficult. Fourth, give it form and anchor the experience. This is vital. After the inner dialogue feels complete or reaches a natural pause, you need to anchor the experience in the conscious world. Give it concrete form. Otherwise, it can just evaporate back into the unconscious like a dream. Write the dialogue down verbatim, maybe like a script. Draw or paint or sculpt the figure you encountered. Maybe express the feeling of the encounter through music or movement. This act of giving it form makes the experience tangible, honors it, and aids integration. And finally, fifth, ethical confrontation and integration. This is the step that really makes active imagination transformative, distinguishing it from just having an interesting fantasy. Reflect deeply on the dialogue, the experience. What did the figure say? What did it seem to want or demand? What was its message? An ethical confrontation means taking this message seriously, considering its real-world implications for your actual life. How might your behavior need to change based on this insight? How might your attitudes or understanding of yourself need to shift? This step requires a conscious commitment to try and integrate the insight into your daily life. That conscious effort is how genuine psychological change and growth actually happen through this method. The core takeaway is powerful. Active imagination isn't just fantasy. It's a conscious, respectful dialogue with your inner world that demands ethical reflection and leads to real-life transformation.
That sounds incredibly powerful, potentially quite intense, too. Switching gears just slightly, there's another famous Jungian concept, synchronicity. You mentioned that idea of meaningful coincidence and a causal connecting principle. Can you unpack that a bit more? It feels kind of mystical.
It does have that quality, doesn't it? A synchronicity, in Jung's terms, happens when you have an inner psychic event, maybe a thought, a strong feeling, a dream image, and then seemingly unrelatedly, an external physical event occurs in the outside world that mirrors or corresponds to that inner event. The absolute key is that this correspondence feels profoundly meaningful to the person experiencing it, yet there's no discernible causal link between the inner state and the outer event. One didn't cause the other in any normal physical sense.
Can you give us that famous example again, the scarab beetle one? It really illustrates it.
Sure. Jung was working with a patient who was very intellectually defended, very rationalistic, stuck in her therapy. She was telling him about a dream she had the night before in which someone gave her a piece of jewelry shaped like a golden scarab beetle. As she was describing this dream image, Jung heard a distinct tapping sound at his closed office window. He turned, opened the window, and immediately a beetle flew into the room. It wasn't a scarab, they aren't native there, but it was a Cetonia aurata, a rose chafer beetle, which is the closest European equivalent in color and form.
Wow, right at that moment.
Right at that exact moment, he caught the beetle and presented it to her, saying, "Here is your scarab." This uncanny event completely broke through her rigid rationalism and became a major turning point in her analysis. More common examples, maybe less dramatic, might be things like you're thinking intensely about a friend you haven't spoken to in years, and moments later the phone rings and it's them. Or you're wrestling with a huge life decision, feeling lost, and you keep encountering images or mentions of a specific animal, say, an owl, everywhere you look, and that symbol feels deeply significant to you.
Things that make you go, whoa, that's weird.
Exactly. While mainstream science might just dismiss these as confirmation bias or random chance, Jung saw something more profound, operating a connection between psyche and matter that operates outside of linear causality. Now, the practical value here isn't really about trying to scientifically prove that psychic events influence the physical world. That's a different debate. For Jung, the value was in paying attention to these moments when they happen to you. Cultivating an awareness of synchronicity can provide this incredible sense of guidance, of affirmation, a feeling that your inner world and the outer world are somehow connected, communicating. These events can feel like little signposts from your deeper self, maybe confirming you're on the right path, or perhaps drawing your attention forcefully to a particular theme or symbol that needs conscious reflection. At the very least, they can instill a sense of awe, wonder, and meaning about the mysterious nature of reality. The insight here is really about openness. Synchronicity might be the universe whispering meaningful guidance from your deepest self if you're just open enough to listen and notice the echoes.
Looking back at all these tools, shadow work, dreams, active imagination, even noticing synchronicity, there seems to be a common thread running through them. What connects them all?
That's a great observation. The common thread, the underlying principle in all these distinctly Jungian methods, is the creative holding of tension between the conscious and the unconscious. It's about fostering a dialogue.
Not about one side winning.
Exactly. It's not about the conscious mind dominating and suppressing the unconscious, like pure rationalism might try to do. Nor is it about the unconscious just flooding and overwhelming the conscious mind, like in psychosis. In shadow work, your conscious ego deliberately engages with the stuff it has unconsciously projected or repressed. In dream analysis, your conscious mind makes an effort to understand the symbolic language coming from the unconscious. In active imagination, the ego enters into a direct, respectful dialogue with figures emerging from the unconscious. In every case, it's about cultivating this respectful, sustained, ongoing conversation between these two incredibly powerful realms of your psyche. And the outcome of this dialogue, the insight gained, the artwork created, the dream understood, the synchronicity acknowledged, is often that third thing we talked about with opposites. It belongs fully to neither realm alone, but emerges from their interaction, their synthesis. This reveals the fundamental mechanism of psychological growth in Jung's view. The growth happens not by eliminating the tension between opposites, but by consciously holding that tension creatively until something new, something more whole, a more integrated perspective is born from it. So ultimately, these tools aren't just a set of rigid instructions or techniques to master. They are fundamentally about cultivating a completely different way of perceiving reality, a way Jungian analysts often call symbolic thinking.
As opposed to literal thinking.
Exactly. Modern Western life heavily trains us in literal, logical, rational, cause and effect thinking, which is useful for many things. But Jungian work requires learning, or maybe relearning, a different language altogether, the language of the soul, the language of symbols, images, metaphors, myths. Doing dream analysis effectively isn't about looking up symbols in a dream dictionary. It's about discovering what a symbol means to you, personally, archetypally, in the context of your life right now. Practicing active imagination means treating an inner image as if it were real, engaging it respectfully to learn its unique wisdom for you. Doing shadow work means learning to see that intensely irritating trait in your colleague, not just literally, but as a potential symbol of something unlived, unacknowledged, or feared within yourself. So the practical application of Jungian psychology at its deepest level is about cultivating the symbolic literacy, learning to read the rich, multi-layered, meaningful text of your own inner life, becoming fluent in the native language of your own soul. The ultimate takeaway is about perception. Jungian tools aren't just techniques. They're powerful ways to cultivate symbolic thinking, enabling you to finally understand and speak the profound language of your own soul.
Now, to really appreciate Jung's unique place in psychology, we probably need to understand his origin story a bit better, especially that intense relationship and eventual split with Sigmund Freud. It wasn't just two guys falling out. It was a fundamental fork in the road for depth psychology, wasn't it? Revealing two really different maps of the human psyche and even different ideas about the purpose of life itself.
Oh, absolutely fundamental. Freud's model, psychoanalysis, was essentially reductive and retrospective. He saw the unconscious primarily as this personal basement filled with repressed memories and instinctual drives, mostly sexual and aggressive, he thought stemming from unresolved conflicts in your early childhood. For Freud, the main driver, the libido, was defined almost purely as sexual energy. So his therapy aimed meticulously at digging up and resolving those past conflicts to get rid of your current neurotic symptoms. It was all about looking backward to fix the present. Jung, on the other hand, proposed a model that was perspective looking forward and synthetic aiming to bring things together. He absolutely accepted Freud's idea of a personal unconscious filled with repressed stuff, but his huge innovation was adding the collective unconscious underneath it.
The universal layer.
That universal inherited layer. And for Jung, this wasn't just a bin for repressed junk. It was a vast, creative, even spiritual source of wisdom containing those archetypes. And he redefined libido. Not just sexual energy, but a much broader general life force. Energy that fuels creativity, spirituality, the innate drive towards wholeness, towards self-realization, towards individuation. So Jung's therapeutic goal, analytical psychology, was much broader than just symptom relief. It was about facilitating that lifelong process of individuation, integrating all the parts of the psyche to achieve not just less suffering, but a future-oriented state of wholeness, meaning, and connection to something larger than the ego. The key distinction is stark. Freud dug into the personal past to fix repression. Jung looked towards the future potential driven by a universal, meaning-seeking life force.
Okay, fast forward to today. The therapeutic landscape is dominated, at least in many places, by cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Very practical, very evidence-based. How does Jungian analysis stack up against CBT? Are they just completely different worlds, or worse, opponents?
That's a great comparison because it highlights another crucial distinction this time between a focus on psychological depth versus a focus on conscious action and thought patterns. They really do operate on different levels and have different aims. CBT, as you said, is highly practical, problem-oriented, and intensely focused on the present. Its core idea is that our emotions and behaviors are largely determined by our conscious thoughts and beliefs. So the goal of CBT is to identify maladaptive or irrational thought patterns, I'm useless, everyone hates me, and then actively challenge and change them to relieve symptoms like anxiety or depression. It's usually short-term, structured, and gives people concrete coping skills. From a Jungian viewpoint, CBT works almost entirely at the level of the conscious ego. Jungian analysis, by contrast, is typically a long-term, depth-oriented process. Its main focus isn't the immediate symptom itself, but the underlying unconscious root causes of the suffering. It delves into the symbolic meaning hidden within symptoms, dreams, relationship patterns, life difficulties. The aim is to facilitate the integration of unconscious material, the shadow, the animanimus, and support that lifelong journey of individuation. The goal isn't just to manage symptoms, although that often happens. The goal is much bigger. To fundamentally transform the entire personality structure, leading to greater wholeness, resilience, creativity, and a deeper, more enduring sense of meaning in life. The fundamental difference is scale. CBT helps you manage the problematic thoughts and behaviors on the surface. Jungian analysis aims to transform the entire inner landscape from which those surface issues arise. So are they opponents? I really don't think so. They address fundamentally different levels of the psyche and can actually be seen as potentially complementary.
How so?
Well, CBT can be incredibly effective at strengthening the ego, giving you tools to manage overwhelming anxiety or crippling depression, providing stability, building coping skills. And frankly, having a reasonably strong, resilient ego is often necessary before you can safely undertake the deeper, sometimes quite destabilizing work of confronting the powerful, often challenging contents of the unconscious in Jungian analysis. You need a solid container for that kind of work. So in a way, you could see CBT as providing the sturdy walking boots and compass needed for the journey, while Jungian analysis provides the detailed map of the entire terrain, including the hidden valleys and the towering peaks.
Now, Jung's work, sitting as it does between science and something more like spirituality or philosophy, has always attracted criticism from the mainstream scientific establishment. We should probably tackle those criticisms directly.
Absolutely. It's important to address them. The main criticisms usually fall into a few categories. First, the lack of empirical evidence in the traditional sense. Critics argue that core concepts like the collective unconscious or archetypes are just too speculative, too metaphorical, and lack the kind of systematic quantitative proof that modern science demands. Second, related to that, is the issue of unfalsifiability. Popper's idea, right? Many of Jung's theories are very difficult, maybe impossible, to design an experiment for that could potentially prove them false. And for many scientists, if a theory can't be falsified, it's not really scientific. Third, there's the charge of subjectivity and ambiguity. Critics say the concepts are often vaguely defined, relying heavily on the analyst's or individual's personal interpretation rather than objective, standardized measurements. How do you measure an archetype? And finally, there's the whole integration of mysticism. Jung's deep and open interest in things like alchemy, astrology, Gnosticism, Eastern religions. This leads many to label his work as unscientific mysticism rather than rigorous psychology. Now, how do we respond to these? Well, defenders of Jung would argue that these criticisms often involve a kind of category error. They're trying to apply the strict criteria of the natural sciences, like physics or biology, to the study of the human psyche, which might require a different kind of methodology. The charge that Jung's concepts are unscientific because they're hard to quantify or falsify assumes that experimental, quantitative methods are the only valid path to knowledge. Jung didn't see himself as doing predictive physics. He saw himself as an empiricist, in a different sense, a phenomenological empiricist. His theories were grounded in the systematic, detailed observation of psychic phenomena, of inner experiences gathered from thousands of patients, and his own intense self-exploration over decades. Criticizing Jungian psychology for being unfalsifiable is a bit like criticizing history or literary analysis for being unfalsifiable. It might be true, but it's arguably applying the wrong standard. The proper validation for a system like this might lie less in laboratory predictability and more in its explanatory power for the depth and complexity of human experience and, crucially, in its therapeutic efficacy. Does it actually help people?
Okay, so what is the evidence for its therapeutic efficacy? Does it help people?
That's the critical question. And on that front, the picture is actually much more positive than the critics often acknowledge. For a long time, Jungian analysis was accused of lacking empirical proof. But starting mainly in the 1990s, a growing body of evidence, particularly from naturalistic outcome studies conducted in places like Germany and Switzerland, where this therapy is often covered by public health systems, has emerged. These studies consistently show that Jungian psychotherapy leads to significant and lasting improvements, not just in reducing symptoms of depression and anxiety, but also in deeper changes to personality structure, interpersonal functioning, and overall life satisfaction and conduct.
And these changes last?
Yes, impressively so. Follow-up studies show these positive changes often remain stable for up to 6 years after therapy ends. And interestingly, some studies even suggest that patients continue to improve on some measures after the formal therapy has finished, suggesting some deep process has been set in motion. Furthermore, data from health insurers has indicated that patients who complete Jungian therapy often subsequently reduce their overall use of other healthcare services, doctor visits, medications, hospital stays, sometimes dropping to a level below that of the general population.
That suggests a pretty profound impact. And is it cost-effective? It sounds long-term.
It is typically long-term, but research suggests these significant, deep changes are often achieved with an average of around 90 sessions. When you consider the depth and longevity of the changes, it can be argued that it's actually quite cost-effective, especially compared to the cost of chronic mental health issues or repeated short-term interventions that don't address root causes. So, while more research, especially large-scale randomized controlled trials, which are hard to do well for long-term depth psychotherapies, is always welcome, the existing empirical evidence strongly suggests that Jungian psychotherapy is an effective, empirically supported treatment that fosters deep and lasting psychological change. The key takeaway is this. Despite valid critiques about its fit with certain scientific models, a solid body of evidence supports Jungian therapy's real-world effectiveness in helping people achieve profound and lasting transformation. Hashtag outro alpha.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it feels like Carl Jung's analytical psychology offers us something truly profound. It's much more than just another theory of personality or a specific type of therapy. It really gives us this incredibly comprehensive, detailed, almost majestic map for a lifelong journey of self-exploration. It's this bold invitation, isn't it? To look beyond the surface of our everyday lives, past the conscious ego, past the social masks of the persona, and to dare to delve into those vast, sometimes mysterious, but ultimately profoundly wise depths of the unconscious within us.
Exactly. And the ultimate goal, the purpose of that journey, as Jung saw it, isn't really about achieving constant happiness or some impossible state of perfection free from struggle. It's about striving for wholeness, which comes through that often difficult, demanding, but incredibly rewarding lifelong process of individuation. And the powerful tools Jung gave us working with the shadow, analyzing our dreams, engaging in active imagination, noticing synchronicity, they aren't just techniques to eliminate problems or feel good all the time. They're fundamentally skills for cultivating a deeper, more resilient, more conscious, and ultimately more meaningful relationship with every single part of ourselves, the light and the dark, the known and the unknown. And the transformation that engagement offers, it's about shifting. Shifting from maybe feeling like a passive victim, tossed around by your unconscious complexes and blinded by your projections, to becoming a conscious, active collaborator with those powerful, archetypal forces that shape your inner world and ultimately your destiny, if you connect all this to the bigger picture. The ultimate benefit isn't about achieving some fantasy life free from all conflict or suffering. As you said, that's a fool's errand. It's about living a life with far greater authenticity. with a deeper sense of purpose, and with a profound feeling of connection to your own deeper self, and through that, a more genuine connection to the wider world and the people in it. It's really about having the courage to become who you were always truly meant to be in all your unique complexity. So the question maybe to leave listeners with is, what hidden depths within you are right now waiting, perhaps impatiently, to be explored?
That's a powerful question. What stands out most to you from everything we've covered today? And maybe, just maybe, how might you begin, even in a small way, to listen more closely to your own inner compass, to the whispers from those depths?